All right, if you're just joining us as we wait for folks to enter into the webinar room, there's a slide up encouraging you to use the chat box at the bottom of your screen and share some information about yourself so that as the webinar progresses, folks know who else is on the call and we can get a little bit of a sense of where you are. All right, we've got the brave first few who are expert chatters. For those of you just joining us, go ahead and let us know who you are. Use that chat box, and we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. All right. In the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started so that we can make sure that we can use all of our time for what you're really here for, which is hearing from our awesome panelists. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Stephanie Schooley, and I serve as Director of Campus Compact of the Mountain West, broadcasting to you from the History Colorado Center here in awesome and beautiful Denver, Colorado. We are so happy to have you be part of our 10th Campus Compact National Webinar of the Year, High Impact Community Engaged Learning Practices and Processes, with our wonderful and talented presenters, whom I will be introducing shortly. Here's our little plug. Check out the Compact Nation bi-weekly podcast series, hosted by the president of Campus Compact, Andrew Seligson, Miss Emily Shields, director of Iowa Minnesota Campus Compact, and Marisol Morales, vice president for network leadership. You can find it on any of your favorite podcast listening apps. You do not want to miss it. It's full of the latest and greatest, and it's super engaging and entertaining. In addition, there's still time to register for the Campus Compact National Conference. Title of the conference is Full Participation, the Promise of Democracy, Opportunity, and Voice, taking place in Seattle from March 29th through April 1st, 2020. Now, on to the guests of the hour and a half. Christina Barger has been the manager of the CSU Stem Vista program since its inception in 2014. With a deep commitment to justice, equity, and inclusion, her work with the CSU Stem Vista program focuses on the elimination of race, class, and gender disparities in STEM. The program is founded on principles of equity, cross-cultural communication, and social justice. And as a CSU and Vista alumna, Christina designs and facilitates social justice trainings for the young professionals in the program. Christina received her undergraduate degree in communication studies from California State University, Chico, her master's degree in leadership with a concentration in nonprofit management from Northeastern University, and is currently pursuing her EDD from Fresno State. So she's very busy. I'd like to also introduce Kathy Avila Lin is an independent consultant based in San Jose, California, and serves as the professional development specialist for the CSU Stem Vista program. Kathy is an effective facilitator and coach in a variety of areas related to organizational effectiveness, strategic planning, management leadership, and personal development with experience in education, nonprofit, and business settings. Her experiences and talents allow her to model and inspire others to be effective leaders within organizations which value and promote authenticity, integrated and sustainable lives, meaningful work, inclusion, social equity, and justice. A native Californian, Kathy earned her undergraduate degree in psychology from California State University, Chico, and her master's in education from Loyola University, Chicago, in educational leadership and policy, with an emphasis in adult development, and has designed and implemented a variety of initiatives and programs over her impressive 25-year career in higher education. I want to thank the panelists so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with this topic as part of this webinar. It's truly engaging and meaningful. I can't wait to hear what you have to say, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. And thanks to all of our participants today for joining us. Kathy and I are really excited to share with you about how we have supported campuses in the California State University system in designing asset-based educational experiences, specifically for science, technology, engineering, and math students. Before we begin our time today, I do want to share we have our fabulous Vista leader here with us today, Emily Ward, who will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat for us. So if you have any questions as we move through the presentation, please feel free to shoot those in the Q&A or in the chat box, and we'll respond to those as we move through our time together. Before we begin sharing about asset-based approaches, we want to provide a little bit of context about the CSU system and the CSU Stem Vista program. So the California State University, or the CSU, is the largest, most diverse university system in the country. Our 23 campuses, both large and small, serve diverse regional communities. We serve nearly 500,000 students, more than half of whom are students of color. 1 in 3 undergraduates is first in their family to attend college, and 54% of undergrads receive the Pell Grant. Our system also employs 50,000 faculty and staff and has a network of over 1 million alums. We award nearly half of the state's bachelor's degrees, and 1 in 10 of California employees is a CSU grad. As many of us know, despite many efforts over the last decade, too few students who begin college make it to graduation. In the United States, only 60% of students who enroll in a 4-year college finish within 6 years. So in 2015, the CSU launched Graduation Initiative 2025. It's an ambitious plan to increase graduation rates, eliminate equity gaps in degree completion, and meet California's workforce needs. You'll see here on the slide that our goal by 2025 is really to double 4-year graduation rates from 19 to 40%, and also increase 6-year graduation rates by 13%, so from 57% to 70%. There is also an ambitious goal to eliminate all equity gaps, because we know that the difference in degree attainment continues to be disproportionately associated with socioeconomic status, race and ethnicity, and family history in higher education. Like many university systems in the nation, in 2015 in the CSU, we had a 15% gap in graduation rates by race and ethnicity. In order for the CSU to close this gap, we really needed to graduate 4,625 more underrepresented minority freshmen from the fall 2015 cohort within 4 years. I want to point out that students of color in the CSU, so African American, Black, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Latino students, are categorized within our system as underrepresented minorities. And as we just heard on the last slide, That is an inaccurate description of students of color within the CSU system. And often this language carries many biases and assumptions with it. And this was actually the conversation around the use of the term URM that really sparked our program's adoptions of the models that we're going to share with you shortly. I also want to note that in the CSU, we see similar gaps here that we see with race and ethnicity for students who are first in their family to attend college, with nearly a 19% gap. That would require graduating 4,000 more first-generation students, and a 16% gap for Pell Grant recipients, which would mean graduating 5,000 more low-income students. The CSU has a lot of work to do to close these gaps, and the CSU Stem Vista program is focused on doing just that, specifically in STEM degree programs where we see even larger disparities. So of the nearly 15,000 first-time full-time freshmen who declare a STEM major at entry, this is in 2012, 39% of those students started in STEM and graduated in STEM in 6 years. Whereas only 28% of African American, Native American, and Latino students graduated compared to 52% of white students. 30% of Pell Grant recipients compared to 47% of non-Pell Grant recipients, and 35% of female students compared to 42% of male students graduated with a STEM degree within 6 years. With this in mind, we recognize that our systems in the United States, including the CSU, were not created with people of color, low-income communities, or with women in mind. And therefore, the CSU Stem Vista program came to light, and we're focused on eliminating race, class, and gender disparities in STEM undergraduate degree programs. So as a system-wide initiative, the CSU Stem Vista program is a key component in meeting the CSU's graduation initiative goals that we just heard about and our nation's STEM workforce demands by effectively serving the students who are already on our campuses and who have already declared a STEM major. This is all about student success. So our CSU campus teams that we work with that are a part of our program are granted a full-time VISTA member. And our VISTAs help build capacity for implementing and enhancing opportunities for STEM students to excel in and complete their STEM bachelor's degrees. And all of our VISTA projects have a specific focus on working with students of color, low-income students, and women in STEM degree programs. Our program also supports our campuses in using historical and student-specific data to target their actions and their student support programs to address student leaving patterns. When are our STEM students leaving? Why are they leaving? And how can we support them? So while our CSU Stem Vista program doesn't dictate the projects or programs or interventions that our VISTA members and their campus partners are implementing, we do prioritize campus teams that are utilizing an asset-based approach. And they have an interest in learning more about effective foundational approaches to closing these equity gaps. And so the CSU Stem Vista program utilizes and trains our VISTA members and campus supervisors on implementing sustainable asset-based approaches to STEM education reform. And we use 3 core models to do this. The first is the cross-cultural understanding, where we provide foundational overview of social justice, equity, oppression, and inclusion. And so over the academic year, we introduce Bobby Harrow's cycle of socialization and the cycle of liberation. And together in teams and within our network, we learn about tools and concepts, practices that enable us to build authentic relationships that are based on trust and mutual understanding to dismantle oppression in our work and in our lives. The second is the spheres of influence, and this is a framework for reflection and action planning, and it's centered around our spheres of influence. So from influence over ourselves as individuals, our relationships with other people, the organizations and institutions we're a part of. And so this framework provides us a way to consider our connectedness and positionality in relation to our values, interests, and goals. And the third model is the community cultural wealth model. This is an asset-based framework developed by Dr. Tara Yosso. And I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who's going to introduce the model to you all. And we're going to take some time to reflect on our own cultural capital and hear a little bit more about how campus programs are applying this model to their work with students.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christina. So as we begin to talk about the community cultural wealth model, using the show of hands feature, which is in the participant list next to your name, you can mark your hand or not. I'm interested in if you all would let us know if you have heard of the model or if you have utilized the model in some way. So if you could just simply click on the hand next to your name so we can see that, get a sense of. I think I've got, looks like.
Got about 9 folks raising.
Yeah, 9 or 10 hands raised. That's great. All right. So the community cultural wealth model, again, designed by Dr. Yosso in 2005, allows us to consider students within an asset-based framework, providing a guide for us to think about the different types of cultural knowledge, skills, abilities, and networks that students of color possess and utilize to survive and resist racism and other forms of discrimination that they might encounter throughout their education. The model provides a lens for us to view different types of student strengths, highlighting various forms of capital that students bring with them from their homes and their home communities. Again, those that they're bringing into the educational environments and that they contribute, rather, to their effectiveness and their resilience. The model immediately ignited discussion and change within our program, moving us to design teaching and learning experiences that welcome students' whole selves and that actively honor diverse ways of knowing, diverse ways of being, diverse ways of learning. So as we strive to center our work on the student experience, again, in an effort to close equity gaps related to race, class, and gender primarily, the model encourages us to think about how we design educational activities that acknowledge and utilize all types of cultural capital through our programs, within our curriculum, within our trainings, and even how we facilitate relationships within and among our students. And so as you can see here on the slide, Dr. Yosso model, the model identifies 6 types of cultural capital. And now I'm going to share a definition of each. So this first one, aspirational capital, is nurturing students' dreams and goals along with their resiliency to obtain them. And when we think about aspirational capital, we might think about what assumptions do we have about our students' aspirations? And we also might think about how are we nurturing the growth of our students' aspirations? The next form of capital, familial capital, is what we bring based on the important people in our lives. But with those, we have strong, caring relationships and bonds. Here we might think about how do we recognize and help students draw on the wisdom, the values, and the stories from their homes and home communities? How do we, as educators, create environments that honor and invite families to participate, to be involved in some way? Social capital is the network of peers and social contacts that are committed to sharing information, community resources, emotional support, and guidance. Here we might think about how do we help students stay connected to the communities and individuals instrumental in their educational success. We also might think about how we can facilitate the engagement between students and others on campus, like student-led organizations, peer mentors, tutors, other advisors, other university staff, other faculty that can contribute to their success as well. The next one is navigational capital, and this is the skills and attributes students bring to navigate resiliently through systems that were created without them in mind. So here we might think about, how do we leverage the skills students use to access college? How do we help them to leverage those while they're in college? How do we support students in navigating our institutions? Like thinking about their interactions with teachers, faculty, thinking about their interactions with student support staff, thinking about their interactions with their peers. The fifth form of capital is linguistic capital, which gets us to think about the multiple languages and communication styles for listening, sharing thoughts, sharing feelings, and ideas. So again, are there other than our spoken language, what other communication styles do students utilize? And how are we supporting the language and communication strengths of our students? To what degree do courses utilize inclusive pedagogical practices? And this last form of capital is resistant capital. This is the knowledge, the skills, attitudes, and beliefs that strive to interrupt and dismantle stereotypes and assumptions. So here we might think about, how do we support students who are committed to engaging in and serving their home communities? What opportunities do we provide students in and outside of the classroom to prepare them for full participation in society? So that being said, what we'd like to do is give you an opportunity to think about each of these capitals and to just reflect on them in relationship to your own experience. So we have a couple of questions for you, and I'll ask you the question, and we're going to ask you to respond to the question using the chat feature here in our webinar platform. So once I ask the question, if you would just type just simply the one-word name of the capital that comes to mind for you that best answers the question in this moment. Okay, so our first question: which form of cultural capital did you utilize most as a student? So I'll just give you a few minutes to respond using the chat feature of which form of capital did you utilize most as a student? Again, we'll give you about a minute.
We're seeing a great mix here between familial, social, and navigational, a sprinkling of resistance, which I love to see.
Yes, lots of social and familial. Fantastic. Okay, let's give you another question. Which form of cultural capital do you see most in your students right now? And again, using the chat feature, if you would just type in the form of capital that you believe you see most in your students right now.
And in your chat box, make sure you're sending to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can enjoy your comments. I see a great comment here from Heather Lynn, who shared that the capitals she utilized most kind of transitioned throughout her time as a student, from navigational in the first 2 years and then to social and aspirational, which is great. Interesting observation.
It is. And in terms of what we're seeing in students, it seems like there's some aspirational, some social, a little bit of everything. some resistant here as well. Some navigational. And again, lots of aspirational here. Fantastic. So here's one more question for you all. Which forms of cultural capital are being recognized most by your programs or institutions? So if you take a step back for a minute, and again, you can think about your own program, your own department, or about your institution broadly. Which forms of cultural capital do you believe are being recognized, are somewhat invited the most? These are coming in quick now. Everyone's got the hang of the chat. This is fantastic. So again, more aspirational, social and familial, lots of social.
Yeah.
Some linguistic. Resistant, with the caveat of, at least in my department, absolutely, it varies department to department, office to office, definitely. Quite a bit of social.
Fantastic. This is great.
Yeah, sprinkling of navigational again. So fantastic.
All right.
We'll come back to these in a little bit. Christina's going to take a moment to share some examples with you about how we see the model at play.
Yeah, and so thinking about, this is a theoretical framework for thinking about the cultural capital that students come to our college campuses already possessing. And so we want to share some examples of what this model can look like in action. And so we're going to start by sharing a little bit about how we in the CSU Stem Vista program share this with our Vista members and their campus supervisors, and then share a little bit about how they're then taking that back to their campuses through work with students, faculty, and community partners. And so there are several ways that we are using Yosso's model in our program. First, it's embedded in our application and reporting process. So this means that campuses that work with us and supervisors, they're already thinking about asset-based strategies in their work and thinking about how they can go deeper with the support of a Vista member. We bring our Vista members and supervisors together in person a couple times a year where we really start to engage and reflect on Yosso's model in a variety of ways. We like to keep it fun sometimes and do a nice icebreaker of cultural capital bingo, where folks can connect by responding to prompts like, share a time when you used your navigational capital, or what's Dr. Yosso's first name? Vistas and supervisors can then dig a little bit deeper with the model, and so we have them complete a working together discussion guide. And this supports them in building really an authentic working relationship that honors and acknowledges the different cultural capitals that both supervisor and Vista member bring. From how they want to communicate, so talking about logistical, linguistic capital, how they got into this work, their aspirational capital, and how together they might recognize, examine, and address oppression that appears in their work. So thinking about their resistant capital. We also do an identity and cultural capital shuffle to kind of build a sense of community amongst our network and to allow them to spend some time reflecting in order to raise their self-awareness, their cultural self-awareness. We invite them to reflect on things that they may not have to think about, or things they do have to think about every day in regards to their identity and the cultural capitals they bring with them. We also encourage our Vista members to use Yosso's framework when thinking about their professional identity and growth during the year. So throughout the year, we support them in thinking about how they can weave this into their everyday work with students. And we also, as they get ready to end their year of national service, help them think about how they can incorporate it into their resumes, cover letters, and talk about it during their interviews. So Vistas and supervisors are engaging with the community cultural wealth model through these various formats throughout the year. And this has really enabled our Vista members and supervisors to take this back to campus and to their work with students, faculty, staff, and community partners. And so we want to share a few examples of how folks are embedding this in their work. So first, we have folks who are sharing this with their community partners. An example of this is the Center for Community-Based Learning at Humboldt State University, where they introduced the model to community partners and invited them to a brown bag lunch discussion about how their service sites were acknowledging and embracing the capitals of their service learning students and the community members they serve, opening up a dialogue through a framework. Several Vista members have shared this with faculty partners, like our Vista members at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where they developed a training for faculty on cultural relevant faculty mentoring and undergraduate research experiences. The incorporation of this model in our program has also really helped us connect with other equity-based initiatives with faculty partners. For example, at CSU San Marcos, the Vista member is supporting a faculty learning community that supports them in culturally validating their curriculum. Additionally, Vista members and their campus supervisors introduce the model to student leaders. Specifically at San Jose State, the peer education program, they participated in a training where they presented the model and invited student leaders to consider their own cultural capital and how they can acknowledge and embrace the cultural capital of the students that they're mentoring, advising, tutoring, and coaching. Another example that we've seen kind of evolve over the last few years with Vista member support is at Stanislaus State, where they've worked to deeply embed Yosso into their science in the community K-12 outreach programs. So the K-12 outreach programs are facilitated by STEM ambassadors, and these are student leaders at Stanislaus State. And through these programs, the STEM ambassadors are invited to share their higher education experience with K-12 youth and their families, to share about their passion for STEM, science. They facilitate hands-on science activities in multiple languages and translate program materials and event signage into Spanish. Each STEM ambassador name tag indicates if they speak another language. Parents and community members are also invited on campus to participate in the science activities. Food and drinks are provided, and this helps create opportunities for students to build and utilize their social networks. And finally, STEM ambassadors utilize a self-empowerment model that demonstrates their resistant capital. San State really provides a strong example of how they've adjusted their approach and programming in order to create spaces that invite students to share and explore their unique cultural capitals. And these are really intentional behaviors that are a part of their program procedures in order to create a culture that is really responsive to student voices and where their cultural capital is really heard and valued.
Before we do some more reflection, I just want to take a second to see if there are any additional questions. I've seen a couple of questions come through in the chat and one in the Q&A, but just wonder if there's anything else that needs clarity or anything else that you want to hear more about. The most recent question was again about what does the model look like in practice, which hopefully the examples that Christina just shared helped to answer that. It's thinking about how do we take each capital as we're planning for, again, an activity or a program or curriculum, and think about how are we inviting students to share the capital that they bring through the activities that we're creating and designing. And so that they're coming and share, and they have space to share their wealth. And also, even just sharing the model itself with students, it's a different model, and it's a message that sometimes students don't necessarily hear. So for us, even with our Vistas, again, who are new professionals, sharing with them that this is what we believe. We believe that everyone is bringing these forms of capital with them to our program, to their departments and their campuses. So we not only invite it, but we just expect it, because we know everyone has this unique brilliance that they're bringing. And so just sharing that and inviting that and sharing that framework with students, and letting them realize that this is what we expect, and we're, like, bring it on, is maybe new for some folks. So in some ways, that just laying that foundation is really important. I don't see many more questions coming in, but please, if there are others, feel free to send them along, because we have folks who will nudge us to answer them. We want to take a moment just to allow you all to just reflect on everything you've heard so far. You've heard a little bit about the CSU broadly and the huge equity gaps that we're facing, and the work around the graduation initiative again, and why this came to light. You've heard about the model itself, some examples of how we use it. So that being said, we have a couple of reflection questions, and then again, you can answer, and even bullets are fine, using the chat function again. And if you would send your chats to all of the panelists and all the participants, that would be great. Our first reflection question is basically, given everything that you've heard so far, kind of what stands out for you? Like, what stands out having heard the model? For those of you who are hearing it for the first time, just kind of what stands out, what resonates with you? And if we could just take a moment to have you share with us through the chat what stands out, that would be fantastic. Looks like folks are typing, but I haven't had anything pop up on my list yet. Christina, have you?
Yeah, just two just popped in.
Awesome.
From Evan, we hear the breadth of resources that we carry within us that we might not realize or receive affirmation for.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Bob shared that you are developing campus programs to support, to help students across these multiple areas of assets. And Robert shared the importance of fearlessly getting students out of their comfort zone. I love that you shared that, and we share within our program and talk a lot about with our Vista members kind of the grow zones, from our comfort zone, grow zone to danger zone, and how are we growing our comfort zone by stepping into our grow zone. And that may be from simply doing the day-to-day work, that may be having equity and conversations about equity and oppression, that may be having conversations about our identity, and that our comfort and grow zones look different for everyone. And so how do we push ourselves to step into that?
Very nice.
Kristen also shared the need to support students in developing all the types of capital mentioned. I think that's a great point in thinking, where's an easy place to start, but then how do you continue to think about the other capitals in conjunction with the work that you're doing and how you're connecting with students? I shared at the beginning that this kind of journey to adopting Yosso's model all began with a Vista conversation about the use of URM, or underrepresented minority students, and all of the bias and assumptions and connotations that came with using that term. And that's how we were talking about students to students, and what kind of detrimental impact that was having. And so continuing to have these types of conversations and look for ways to incorporate all of the capitals is really critical.
We have a couple more comments I'm going to read, and then I think I might respond to all together. Let's see. I believe it was Heather, thinking a lot about intersection of different types for those who bring linguistic capital are often distracted by the need to build navigational capital. And even before that, Ben talks about the model makes sense. And we are on board, but we're looking for more examples on how to operationalize this. And then one more from Amy. It makes me think that these are really important elements to name and encourage in students. My question is, how can we hold and honor the differences in the students without then making a cookie cutter program for them to have to fill into? It seems like it could be similar to the challenges around encouraging diversity, but not having system in place for inclusion. Yeah, those are all really great questions, and that cookie cutter piece is something that we definitely need to be careful of. I think in terms of operationalizing this, I think the model itself can be woven into so many different types of development that we offer students, whether it be woven into a leadership development curriculum, a peer mentoring development curriculum, whether it be woven into, depending on how it might relate to curriculum in the classroom, or even the sense of how might they be a more effective, how might they be maybe a stronger student as a result of understanding this model, and sort of checking in and doing sort of a self-assessment of the capitals that they bring, and how, and again, thinking, kind of answering the same questions you all asked for themselves, which are most at play right now, in which areas might they want to deepen their understanding of their both, let's say if they want to think more about what social capital they hold, and also think about how they might even develop their social capital further. So I think it can be woven in again to, and be seen as in some ways very much relational to leadership skills or skills for being a strong and effective student. And so thinking about it in that way. And I think for us, the self-assessment piece and that reflective piece helps us stay away from the cookie cutter nature of it, because we really are creating spaces for students, again, to do their own self-discovery, to be able to answer for themselves, where are they at, how do they want to grow, fill that in, and then we're really just supporting their action around how that growth might take place and what that growth might look like. But that growth will be different for every student. And so I think that's what helps us sort of stay away from, it's not kind of there's one way to do this. There's so many ways. And again, really having it start from where do the students want to grow and learn. I hope that's helpful.
I do want to point out Karen's comment here, which I think is really important, that Yosso's model is very explicitly not a white heteronormative patriarchal framework. That's an exact opposition of what this is talking about. And so often we don't talk about, when we say traditionally valued capital in higher ed is white heteronormative patriarchal values. And so that's exactly it, Karen. So thank you for pointing that out so that we can more explicitly share that.
Yeah, fantastic. We have one more question before we move on. So I'm interested in hearing, for those of you who mentioned that you've heard of the model, how are you already utilizing asset-based strategies in your work, whether it be this model or others? If you would share with us just a sentence or two about how you're already using asset-based strategies. So Bob just wrote in, only implicitly, not explicitly, like you are illustrating so well. So thank you, Bob. And we're with you. You know, I think we spend time, and over the years, Christine and I worked together for 6 years. This model we will have been about 4 years ago or so. Every year, I feel like we continue to learn so much, which deepens our own understanding, you know, of who we are, of how we're approaching the work, of how we're sharing it with others. And I think we're always talking about things. In some ways, there's times we find ourselves talking about things in very deep and meaningful ways. But then when we get to like audience, some of that goes away. Like it become like we flip to like make, you know, using the jargon or not being as clear or as deep as we might, as we really push ourselves to use the language and to make these things really transparent when we're, you know, with our audience, with our participants, and to be just as deep there as we are in our smaller meetings. It takes sometimes we need to be reminded of that, of how important that is, to be so explicit. Karen wrote, our UGC is a college access model, and all of our conversations about students are strengths-based, asset-based. Personally, as a faculty, this is how I try to see my students, that they come with wealth, and it's our job together to figure out how to apply that to their college success. Absolutely, that's lovely. Lynn writes, planning to develop asset-based mentoring program, starting to discuss how to incorporate the model into classes, generating different ways for student assessment.
That's great. Yeah, Amy had a connected comment about using asset-based strategies in their youth academic mentoring programs, mainly in the way we talk about the opportunities for our university students to work in the community. Relationships and learning opportunities with our youth and neighbors are reciprocal instead of coming from a savior complex. And they're also calling their youth scholars, which is wonderful.
Fantastic. Absolutely.
Similarly connected around savior complex is Lisa's comment about changing their student orientation section from a service-based model to a meet and learn about the community model, with community rather than for community.
Nice.
Ready for our last question, Kathy?
I think so. So we have one more question for you. So again, given everything that you've heard so far and hearing from all of the participants in terms of the questions that you all have shared and your thoughts and the ways in which you're using asset-based models yourselves already, kind of, what do you want to think more about? Like, what do you hope will come from your time on this webinar today, from thinking about this model? What do you want to think more about? And again, using the chat function, if you would just share with us what it is you want to think more about, kind of what's your next step. So Amy shared that I want to think more about how to introduce this model to our student volunteers during training. and training them for community engagement. Fantastic. Aloha states that how to start something similar in our campus. We have such a diverse population. I think it would be great.
Bob shared something interesting. In addition to being a practitioner, I am a researcher, and I will be thinking about how to study the impact that the asset model has on student outcomes, either generally or within the context of service learning. That's fantastic. Laura Rendon has done some qualitative research, I believe, on this in conjunction with cultural validation theory, and it's specifically in STEM, but it could be something to look at to spark some further research ideas.
The person's name again is Laura Rendon, R-E-N-D-O-N. She is based in San Antonio, Texas. One of her more recent books is Sentiment. You know what? Let me put it in the chat. It's Rendon. Sentiment. There we go, G. There it goes. There it is. There's Laura's name for you. And another, I guess, Joanna wrote in about what she wants to think more about, sharing the model with faculty, teaching community-based learning courses to be integrated in preparing students for community engagement experiences. So we have a couple of folks who are thinking about how this might be useful in preparing students to enter the community, which is fantastic. Fantastic.
Right. We are getting close to time to closing out. Kathy and I are more than happy to stick on for any questions that folks would like us to respond to, but we want to thank you for joining us today. We know this is a short webinar and just a snippet with only chat interaction, so we invite you to connect with us via email. We would love to chat with anybody about how they're thinking about asset-based strategies, implementing that into their work. We hope that you've learned something new, have considered something new, or reflected in a new way that can continue to inspire you to do great work with students. We, again, would love to connect with you. We'll stay on for questions, and thank you for your time today.
I'll just add that we also will be at the National Conference in Seattle at the end of March. We're presenting something very similar to this there, but we'll just be, again, on site. So if any of you would like to chat there, please, feel free to reach out between now and then, or at the conference itself. We'd love to meet you and love to talk more about the work. So thanks again for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I wanted to make sure to definitely thank our panelists for today and to thank all of you as attendees for your participation and engagement. We've been recording this, and so we'll send out a link to the recording, share with your colleagues, community partners, students as you see fit. Please fill out the evaluation survey that will be in your inbox shortly to provide feedback. We want to make sure that these webinars remain relevant and something that is helpful for you as you move forward in your own work, in your campus or within your community. And the link to the slides will also be included in that email. Until next time, go in peace. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. Thank you.